What the heck is auto-regulation inside of fitness? What does it have to do with your fitness practice specifically? And why is it so dang important? Those are the things that I will be covering inside of this video. As always, I will start with a bit of a disclaimer that this video is intended for all of the individuals who are inside of my training programs that are available on the Train Heroic platform. I will link those in the description for those of you who are checking this video out because it is a public video on YouTube. I do think this is a really valuable concept inside of fitness, and I think it might be worthwhile to check out even if you aren't in these programs. But if you'd like to join them or check them out, there is always a free week, no strings attached, for anyone who wants to investigate. So, auto-regulation, now that I've gotten that out of the way. Auto-regulation, in my mind, it's a concept that I use to describe balancing your fitness practice based on the various inputs, what you're doing from day to day, and basically just the impact they're going to have on your body, and how to create balance so that you never go overboard and then dip. You don't have these ridiculous peaks and valleys that end up making you stagnant or creating an environment where you're not making progress. Well, I could go heavier, but I'm so wrecked, or I had a really good week and then I messed up. All the classic things we hear when somebody oftentimes is committed. I know I'm doing like a little bit, but when somebody is committed to their fitness practice, but they don't have the systems in place to actually make great progress because they're not checking themselves, and they haven't made it an unconscious progress or unconscious process. And so basically auto-regulation would be getting so good at understanding all of these inputs and the impact they're having that it does become unconscious over time. And I think the best analogy would be, homeostasis, all these processes inside of your body that you're not conscious to that, help you survive and keep your body in an optimal place, whether that's, temperature, pH balance, oxygen, all of those things. So with that, I want to give a few examples of how people, I don't know the right word, how people botch this and how they actually think they're doing it, and then how you want to start implementing certain practices so that you can get to a place where you are hitting that auto-regulation. This is not a black and white concept. We live inside of the gray area, in my mind, inside of fitness practices. I think the highest order would be getting to a place where, everything you do is fluid and unconscious and creates great progress because your feel is on point. But that takes years and years and decades and is a lifelong goal, as opposed to a reality in 3 months you'll be able to do this, in 2 months you'll be able to do this. But that's BS. I'm not trying to sell that to you. But I think it's a good concept to always have in the back of your mind, or maybe even the forefront of your mind, and to be kind of chasing throughout your fitness journey. It's a lifelong journey, right? Just hitting a few months of fitness from January to March or January to May to get ready for like spring and summer. That never really works for long-term health or physical progress. You'll always see people be stuck in that cycle. Why doesn't it work? I did my 3 months. Well, that's not really how this works. You can't ignore biology. Okay, so a few examples. I have no notes. I usually have a little note card, but these are, I've been in the fitness game for so long, coaching group fitness individuals, that there's a lot of examples that I've heard in my time in the game, and I'm just going to pull from those. So let's go with Avatar A. Let's say they're Timmy. Let's say it's a traditional, younger person. Maybe they were semi-competitive in youth sports, and maybe they even played a little college sports. And now they're in their, mid to late 20s. they stepped away a little bit, had to get their job, but they're like, I've been in the gym before. I feel like I know what I'm doing, and so I'm going to go for it and create my own little program, and I'm going to make great progress. But the goal that they have is aesthetic based. I really want my pecs to look good, and I want those nice arms, okay? And that's kind of what they're thinking about. Well, they create this program for themselves, and let's add one more. They want to be lean, right? That's such a big thing. That's what I chase, and it looks a lot different when you really go for it than how most people interpret it. So day one, usually, Monday I come in, I bench, do some pull-ups, and do some, Arnold presses, do some seated rows. Let's say it's basically a big push-pull day. It's all upper body. All right. Then day two, they're like, but I want the arms. So, I do an arm day basically, biceps, triceps, some shoulders, and then I, maybe hit some abs on the back end. Right. Yeah, it feels pretty good, And then Wednesday, that's where I really like to get my sweat going. So I go for like a long run. It's pretty intense, but, it's like, 5 to 6 miles. I start kind of slow and then I hit it really hard at the end. And then, Thursday, I'll do some more like pressing and pulling, and I like, kind of get my legs, but I focus on the bench, and then I do some like flies and, lateral raises to finish off the session. And, I go to like lat pull downs, and I do some, dumbbell rows on the bench, and maybe I do a little bit of legs, and, do some lunges. And then on Friday, I kind of redo the arms, I redo the abs, and I just do a lot of isolation. And then like Saturday is like fun, whatever I want. I go back to the bench. I'm trying to do like a semi-impression of somebody who would be saying this, because if you pick that apart, you're like, man, you're pressing all the time. You're doing all these pressing variations. You're doing a ton of pulling, and you're hitting a really tough, what should be an aerobic session, but it's definitely not, right? If you start running and then you're huffing and puffing, like, I'm ruined. That was probably not aerobic. Aerobic for me is interchangeable with sustainable, right? So if you finish your run, you go, oh, I feel invigorated. I don't feel ruined. That is probably more aerobic than, oh my God, I'm so trash. I need to eat so much tonight because I went a little hard on that last mile and I kind of limped my way through it. Just go to any public park and watch people run, and no one is bouncy on their toes. Everyone's kind of like coming up with all these compensatory patterns to keep up with a pace that they shouldn't be hitting in the first place. It's not aerobic. So that person over time starts having that nagging shoulder injury. Well, they're doing a ton of shoulder work. They've got a bunch of pressing on day one. They've got shoulder isolation work mixed in with, arm work on day two. All of a sudden, they can't kind of keep up with the numbers. Then they fall behind on a session. Then they're trying to catch up. Now they're also so depleted in the evening that they're like, man, I don't know what to eat to get myself feeling good. So I'll go for the ice cream, or I'll go for the sugar, I'll eat the Doritos. And this progress becomes so stagnant because they fall off. Well, I tried to put in a good effort, but it wasn't yielding any results. But that person isn't at a place where they can unconsciously say, you know what, I did a ton of pressing and pulling. I've just got to go to lower body on the next day. And I've got to finish that session off with accessory work instead of doing it on Tuesday. And that Wednesday has to look like a recovery session rather than an all-out assault on mileage, all right? So that would be example A of how somebody's trying to be unconscious, or somebody's trying to be fluid with their training, but in reality, it falls apart because they haven't accumulated enough time in the gym to actually become fluid. They haven't followed enough programs of someone else, of another expert in this field, and they're just kind of doing it for themselves because, well, usually the guys have nice pecs, right? They usually bench, right? So I'm going to bench, But how do I put that inside of a program? How do I go from week to week, month to month to make great progress and stay consistent? So it's somebody kind of jumping in too early to say, I know what I'm doing, I've got this, and then it kind of falls apart. Another great example would be somebody who hits group fitness classes. So this would be somebody who goes with SoulCycle or Peloton, or goes to Orange Theory, or kind of mixes in the two. A lot of the phrasing and the messaging inside of those those group fitness environments is like, let's go, you've got this hour, you can do it, motivational. Those moments where it's like, all right, I know we're getting to the end of the class. Guys, you made it this far. Let's get a final push. You earned it. Let's go, fam. Right? That whole thing is BS. It's cheap coaching, right? Somebody who wanted to be a performer, and it's really, really competitive to be a performer. They looked good based on all of our societal bullshit with regard to, aesthetics. Well, now they get to be a coach and a trainer because their dance practice kept them in shape. They do a little bit of resistance training, so they look like they're in good shape, and now they just sell a different, methodology because they need to pay rent, right? They need to, eat. They need to live. They need to survive. But somebody else is going, oh, wow, that must be how they stay in shape, or they're yelling at me to go a little harder, so I go a little harder, and all of a sudden I have this huge adrenaline and cortisol dump, and I'm kind of trashed for the rest of the day. Whether or not, you feel good at first. If you go from nothing to something, you make some progress. So a lot of people, especially in the group world, oh my gosh, I'm motivated by the people next to me. I'm coming in, there's some added, accountability. That's what everyone's always looking. I just need some accountability. There's this accountability aspect, and I make some great progress for 4 weeks. But man, that is an unsustainable approach to fitness. So there's that drop off. There's no balance. When you get in there, come on, you're sweating, you're breathing hard, get the light weight, dumbbell snatches, 50, go over to the rower, slam the rower, never take a session to dial in your technique, never take a piece of a session to dial in technique. Just go over there, slop around, go over here, now you got it your squats, and then the next day you got, lunges, and you're not prepared to do squats into lunges, and so all of a sudden, same thing, it might take a little more time depending on someone's approach, but then the tweaks, the creaks, the injuries, I had to take some time off, and then I had to only do, I had to do kind of water aerobics, but so it kind of fell off my progress with the lean muscle and losing weight or whatever the goal is. And so that's another aspect of, not knowing how to ignore, not a coach in group fitness, an instructor, a director of the class, not a coach. So learning to say, wait, I'm not actually supposed to go hard in the paint. I just ruined myself on the bike yesterday. So even if it's Peloton cycling versus floor work, in terms of resistance training, just obviously they have to come up with their own language to make it enticing. But, I hammered myself on the bike. This floor work thing can't be, it's got to be slower resistance. I've got to take good rest periods in between. It can't just be bouncing around, constant AMRAPs. So that would be another way in which people miss out on the, on the auto-regulation concept, even though they think they're hitting it. They're not actually in a good rhythm. They're just kind of slamming their head on the wall until, they have a huge bruise here, basically. And I would honestly, I was going to go with a third avatar, and I'll kind of tie it into that second one, but people who are obsessed with running, or maybe not even obsessed, but that's their main practice, because there should almost be a waiver. If you want to get into running, you need to see a psychologist about your attachment to weight loss or thinness, and running being something that gets you there. Again, go to a park and see everyone who's in great shape or has great posture who's crushing themselves with their distance running. It's like zero, right? Or it's really rare. I live in New York City. I'm constantly in Central Park. It's like 1 out of every walk I take with my dog, I'll see like one person who looks semi-competent on their run. That for me, that is a huge issue and a huge indicator of this practice isn't working for a lot of people based on their approach to the endeavor. So, a runner might say, hey, yeah, Monday's kind of my low day, it's more tempo run, kind of distance, I go for like 10 miles, it's kind of an interval, it's kind of like, who knows, I got this program kind of on the internet, a friend kind of recommended it. Tuesday, that's where I try to get as much full body work in as I can, but that ends up being way too high effort. And then Wednesday, I do a high effort run. Okay, so now you got these 2 high effort days coming off of a day that you probably didn't even recover from. You're telling yourself it's light, it probably wasn't. Maybe Thursday you stretch, and then Friday and Saturday you're back to it. You're back to running. And, oftentimes people aren't checking their paces, or if they do, they're thinking, oh man, hey, 9 minutes on my first mile, 9:30 on my second mile, 10 on my third, hey, not bad. I kept it kind of consistent. No. 30-second differences between mile 1, 2, and 3, or 4 and 5 and 6, that means you have a huge drop off. Or if it's 9:30 back to 9, 9:45 back to 9, your pacing is actually really poor. You aren't unconsciously in a great rhythm. You need to really check in on those things before you take the watch off, take the timer off. But people will go for it like that. And my final thing on the running, people who train for marathons, right? Marathons always land on a Sunday. Have you ever noticed that everyone who trains for a marathon, like their big running day is on a Saturday? Think about that disconnect. We are beings of rhythm, the sun and the moon, right? So you're doing your long run on a Saturday for a year prepping for your marathon, and then the actual long distance run, or your Saturdays, usually where people do these long runs for marathons. And then Sunday is where you have to perform and do this long run. Well, why wouldn't you want to get in that rhythm of waking up on a Sunday knowing you're about to get a ton of running volume? You make like a last minute switch to this thing you've done for years, and then all of a sudden, oh shoot, I got to do it on Sunday, once a year, twice a year. It's ridiculous, it makes no sense. But that shows people not being able to actually recognize, oh, if I want this goal, I've got to do this. So there's this disconnect, which is why they can't get into this, state of auto-regulation. My apologies if that was long-winded. This is for people who are interested in fitness, so there's the examples. Now I want to talk about how you can actually get into that state of auto-regulation. The big thing, the first step is actually getting educated on what you're doing inside of the gym. If you don't realize that, 3 reps of heavy bench presses, rest 3 minutes for 10 sets, let's say 80, or let's say 85 to 88% of your 1 rep max. If you're thinking to yourself, well, it's only 30 reps, like that's not such a big deal, then you're not recognizing what a big, input that is for your pecs, for your anterior delts, and for your triceps, right? You could build a session just off of that piece. 3 reps for 10 sets, rest 3 minutes in between each set. If you're feeling great, maybe, you could put a coach's note, go up to 90% if you're feeling it, but that would be a lot of volume at 90%. And then you could do some accessory work. Or you can say, hey, let's do upper lower, let's do some benching, and let's do some deadlifting. And then on the back end, let's do some hamstring glute accessory, and let's do some tricep and shoulder accessory. Goodbye. But that would be a huge input. That would be a big effort. Even though you're not like, well, I'm not sweating, I'm not wrecked. Well, if that's the case, it might be because you don't even have the strength capacity to really push on any of the movements I just talked about. And so you have to spend more time on that. All right. Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there. But the big thing is learning what these inputs do for you and do to you, right? That is the biggest thing is education. So following a program that you didn't write and just figuring out what does this all do to me and what is the why behind the program. All right, again, I'll put in a plug that I try to describe why the heck we're doing what we're doing inside of my programs and that it lends itself to this process of autoregulation. But you need to understand that so that you can almost learn to ignore your preconceptions or push away your preconceptions. Because if your preconception is you need to hit your runs hard to lose weight, knee injury, ankle injury, my hips are fucked, I'm aging poorly, I'm rounded when I walk because my hip flexors are taking the brunt of the work and they're starting to pull my ass forward and I got no muscles on my posterior chain. That's a huge issue. But your preconceptions might have you thinking, I got to do it that way. Just like in a HIIT class, your preconceptions might have you thinking, I've got to hit these hard. I got to keep the weight light. Who cares if I can ever do a pull-up or a push-up, full range of motion. I just got to sweat my ass off. Injuries, shoulders are fucked up, biceps messed up, all that stuff, takes place really quick. This should be about physical health and making great progress for life, and so few people really ever achieve that. So again, an understanding is the big thing. The next piece would be learning to really listen to yourself. Great warm-ups. Prep work is a huge part of this. That's why I'm big on the prep work inside of every session I do, and as a result, all the programs I put out there, because it's exactly based on what I do. So coming in, you just had a huge benching session, you just had a huge deadlifting session, and maybe you are going to try to come in and do some lunges and do some pull-ups. Well, I don't care that they're complementary movement patterns. I'm feeling a little beat up. Right away, I got to know, or I got to remind myself, even if I start feeling good after the prep work, I'm going to bring things down a bit. I wanted to do 6 pull-ups at a time, I'm going to do 3. I wanted to do 80 pounds in each hand on my lunges, I'm going to do 50. Something like that, making the adjustment and telling yourself the adjustment before you get into the session. Right? It's really easy to ignore what you were thinking when you first got out of bed, but are you kind of getting out of bed like this? Then you need to adjust whatever. If you were going to do something intense, you need to adjust it. All right? This is where it can start getting gray, and I don't know how much I want to hammer this, but another piece would be nutrition. So many people take a heinous approach to nutrition. Yeah, I'm going to try keto. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself, why are you going to do that? Well, I want to be lean, I want to be ripped, I want to be thin. And do we know that that's a guarantee? Do we know that that is guaranteed? Keto is going to make you lean and ripped. Well, it worked for, Keto Boy 69. Who cares? Who cares? Is it going to work for you and your lifestyle? Keto Boy 69, doesn't have a 9-to-5, doesn't have 2 kids. His whole friend group, everything he does in his life is associated with fitness and getting lean and ripped. What about you? Oh, well, I got 30 weddings this year. Goodbye. You're not doing that. So how can you approach nutrition to support your fitness goals? And do you have the understanding of, I underate a little bit yesterday. I've got to pull back on the fitness. And again, you have to go through the slight ebbs and flows. It shouldn't be peaks and massive peaks and massive valleys. Some slight ebbs and flows. Oh my gosh, why do I feel so tired today? You have to review your previous 48, 72, 96 hours. I kind of underate. Ooh, I binged a lot on sugar. Ooh, I drank a bunch with the buddies this weekend, with my crew this weekend. Yada, yada, yada. But if you don't have an understanding of that, and you're trying to get into a state of, being, unconscious with your fitness, you're creating your own fitness program, it's just never going to work because you're creating it or you're, approaching it with no actual base of support. So, in the description, as I'm saying this, I will link a few books that I think are super helpful. Food, what the heck should I eat? Who cares that, Dr. Mark Hyman has now, in my mind, kind of in certain ways gone off the deep end, or, he's constantly advertising stuff, or he's basically just an influencer now. But I do think the book has some great information for those of you who want to take a good approach to nutrition or want to have a deeper understanding and have a decent roadmap. Poliquin principles, starting strength, things like that with regard to fitness are really important. Maybe I'll link a couple of people I think do put some good info out there on social media platforms. But that's really important to have a program before you try to do things on your own and really follow. It doesn't matter. You can change programs. Follow someone's 8-week cycle and see what it does, and ask yourself, does this person seem trustworthy? Do they actually know what they're doing? Or are they kind of a sexy influencer who's just like, come on, you want to get in a beach body? You might want to swipe away from that, Again, I guess I'll promote my thing, but there's plenty of people who put out some good programs out there who you can trust, but you got to do your homework, you got to do your research, and follow that and ask yourself how things are going based on the previous 72 hours, 48 hours. Man, I might need to if it feels like you need to take a rest day or a low day, you can adjust the program. But today says heavy bench, go light, remove the weight. They're telling you to do percentage work. Ignore the percentages and literally go off a field. Build throughout. Maybe give yourself one set where you really get a good push. So that in my mind is the essentials around auto-regulation. As I'm saying this, it's such a gray concept that maybe I would need to do a second part. Or if you have watched this far, just put some questions in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. But it has taken me a long time to get into a great state of auto-regulation. So the things I talk about, if you see my videos about, doing the program myself, right now I'm on like the lean muscle progression. When I'm doing like a 20-minute AMRAP, well, I'm already, as I'm looking at it, I know how long a round is going to take me, and I'm learning to like intervalize it. So 10 push-ups, 20 air squats, 25 sit-ups. Okay, let me think about that for a second. You know what? I bet if I gave myself 4 minutes to do that, I could get it done in 4 minutes. So if I have a 20-minute AMRAP, I can shoot for 5 rounds, and I won't hate myself if I end up going for 4, based on how the first round feels. Boom. You're right in the state of auto-regulation because I've put in so much time on movements like that I can look at it, I can take a second and say, I know what I need to do here. And I know how this is going to feel, and based on how I, pushed myself yesterday, I know where I can push and pull based on whatever's in front of me today. But it takes time to be conscious of what you're doing, to then tune out and say, today I'm going to do 200 burpees. I'm going to do some great prep work, and I'm going to do 200 burpees. And since that's mostly, it's a dynamic push, chest, anterior delts, triceps, you know what, tomorrow I'm just going to do some heavy deads, and I'll finish it off with some bicep curls. And, I want to work out every day, so then the next day I'll do some rock climbing, and I'll do the easy paths. And the next day, maybe I will do a little bit of running. And the next day, it's been a little while since, I've done some strength work. So, I'll do some really high quality pull-ups, and I'll pair that with some lunges. And then I'll have a movement day where I'm doing mobility, right? You can get into that rhythm, but you have to have an understanding of how things impact you. So I think hitting a program that has a structure and gives you the roadmap can allow you to recognize, as you get deeper into the program, you know what, instead of pull-ups, I'm going to do lat pull-downs. And you can start making these replacements and making some of your own tweaks based on that roadmap now. Instead of following it 100%, you can slowly do your own thing with it. And then over time, you can recognize, here's how I can, push today or pull back today, or here's what I could do today for my workout. And then you can become almost unconscious and do things, based on how you're feeling and how things have been going, how you've been fueling, how you haven't been fueling. And I will say, I think a lot of the people who make progress and just give some blanket statements, hey man, this worked for me, they are unconscious to all the other things they do. Oh yeah, actually, I eat a lot, I eat healthy. Maybe they eat a lot of sugar. I ate a ton of sugar when I was in more intense fitness. I was approaching CrossFit. That gave me a lot of calories. It actually did allow me to push from day to day. It allowed me to recover because it's really quick, easy calories. Doesn't mean health. If you're really, really going for it, intense bodybuilders, they ain't healthy people. They're jacked. They're not healthy. I got to imagine this has been a long rant and rave, basically, so I'll leave it there. But hopefully you can understand that you need to be conscious to be unconscious. You need to educate yourself to actually make great progress. And, best case scenario or best case scenario for making that initial step is working with a coach that you can reach out to, ask some questions. That's obviously, I'll put that in description. That's all part of my program. So I find that to be really important. And learning, taking some time to learn instead of saying, hey, other people do pull-ups, push-ups, boom, that's going to do it for me. And then, come on, who's making progress with that approach, right? No one. I don't know anyone who's ever just said, I'm going to do it myself based on bullshit I see on social media, and it's all going to be good. There it is, auto-regulation. Let's call it maybe part 1 because I don't know what everyone's going to ask. But I can always be long-winded with the outro. So see you later. Thanks for watching.